Welcome me back to the show, Dr. Angela Cotellessa. I am Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Thank you for coming on the Round 2 Polycast.
Thanks for having me again.
And I like this whole Round 2 idea because it's like, we're bringing you back on. This is Round 2. What's really beautiful about this series is we get to see the difference between what happened where your life was the last time we talked and now it's been a couple years, 2 or 3 years now. So seeing all the different changes that have occurred.
Yeah, for sure.
Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator.
First thing I'd like to ask is, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Life has changed so much since I was on Polycast last time. I no longer work in the federal government. I am really dedicated to, using my time to promote polymathy and reforms in the criminal justice system in the United States. I'm no longer married. I'm in a new relationship. Like, my life has just changed, and I'm involved in so many exciting projects nowadays. I'm loving it.
Juggling a lot of different plates, as a lot of polymaths should.
Yeah, I say, I manage about 5 businesses in 3 industries, or brands anyway. Some of my businesses make money and some of them don't. Yeah. But I continue to be involved in real estate. I've got a family real estate business, my own real estate business. I have my own Polymath brand, an LLC, which is Polymath's Place. I'm also in startup mode for a nonprofit called the Modern Polymaths Institute, which I'm happy to share a little bit about today. And then, like I said, I also work in criminal justice reforms, and having spent 15 years in the federal government, the United States, I really want government to be a force for good. And there is some room for improvement. So I do some work in that area as well. But it keeps me busy. Plus I've got a 7-year-old daughter and I travel a lot. So life's great.
I love all that, and I definitely want to get into the nitty-gritty with polymathy with you too, because I've been on your channel a couple of times as well, and it's just one of those things where every time we talk, we always end up coming up with some kind of idea that's, I want to say new, if you will, like some kind of synergized idea.
Yeah. Oh, I love knowledge creation, ideation, strategic thinking, all of that stuff. I find it really fun to come up with new ideas.
I don't normally ask this question when it comes to the Round 2 Polycast, but I'm curious to think what you would say. What is a polymath to you?
And I'll probably give a different answer than I did 3 or 4 years ago. A polymath is someone who's committed to lifelong, life-wide learning, who's good at unlearning and relearning, and updating and upgrading themselves over the lifespan as new information becomes available. So just from a learning perspective, that's what it is. They tend to be very broad, very versatile, very capable. Some of them just seem unstoppable. And that's part of why I studied them. I was like, wow, these people are awesome. I want to be like that too. There's a sort of quality about it that a lot of polymaths are just more willing to be all in at life. Like if I had to kind of put it in a nutshell, and I don't know if the other thinkers in the space view it the same way. Obviously, we all have our different flavors of how we think about polymathy. But for me, when you look at a polymath who has decided to unleash their full capacities into the world, there's just this quality of just, wow, they're really alive and vibrant and all in. They're not restricting. They're not holding back. They're not fitting in. They're not conforming. There's this real originality that can emerge, which starts to feel like genius frequently. When you're just redoing what's been done, saying what other people have said, rehashing the same old stuff, which may not even be fully informed or entirely correct. Yeah. It sort of keeps what you're capable of dumbed down. But when you express your onlyness, your originality, when you become a really zigzag polymath and a unique mixture, it allows you to be really creative and innovative and new. It allows you to see things in new ways, which may be better than the old ways, So for me, polymathy is about human potential and self-actualization and how we can unleash our truest, most authentic geniuses.
There's definitely that potential of just limitless potential, if you will. Like, you don't limit yourself to a certain field. Because the baseline, obviously, polymathy is like, okay, 3 areas of expertise. But I also kind of see polymathy as like a jack of all trades built into that. So you have your 3 specialties, but you also have that width of a jack of all trades approach. Like, you're not necessarily just getting just 3. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, you're not just limiting yourself to just 3. you may have those three areas, but you're also exploring the wide range else that you could do. Like, what's my fourth one? Like, you got to dabble in order to figure out what the next thing you're going to focus on is.
Yeah, and we live in this society where the dominant narrative for a long time has been that of specialization. And we're told to, get in your swim lane, get in the silo. You might be a round peg in a square hole. We've been pressured to get into that cage of specialization. For a lot of us, specialization does feel very limiting, to be expected to spend a whole lifetime in one domain. Like, it's unnatural for a lot of us. And so when you decide to live your life in a more polymathic way, there is this quality of like just feeling more free as well. There's a freedom to it.
I think the freedom of choice of what area you're interested in is kind of the philosophy of like a jack of all trades too, where you're trying to go as many different ways as possible. That's something I've talked to you about before, is this idea of juggling versus serialized. So you have the one after the other, or you're doing 10 different things at once. And I think that in general, all polymaths do both in some capacity, but there's oftentimes one way someone's leaning almost naturally. So I think for like you and I and a lot of guests on this show, we're a bit more like jugglers. We like to juggle a lot of different things, and eventually over time, those things become those expertise. But I do think there's also this idea that I got from the book Range, that David Epstein, where he was talking about Roger Federer, where he dabbled in like 10 different sports before he finally decided, okay, I'm going to focus on one and because he really felt passionate about that one. He liked the other ones, but he really fell in love with tennis. And so it was one of those things where he really dove into that. And so it almost, where you go wide and it comes coming down. But one thing I really like to think about is not thinking about just one dimensionally across the whole life. Instead, where you have wide, you narrow down to the one you're most passionate about in that time, maybe for that decade even. You go wide again. You come in like an hourglass, going in and out over the course of your life. And by the end of your life, you're going to have multiple different disciplines that way too.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who are polymathic do tend to juggle. Like, some people may kind of become polymaths, where they do one thing for a while and really focused away, and then they do some, develop another expertise. But a lot of the polymaths I know, they really love challenge.
Yeah.
They love like the untangling of knots. They love to solve problems, and they're really capable, intelligent people. So even just focusing on one thing at a time is not common among polymaths. We tend to be very busy people. But like you said, there is tremendous value, especially for young people. Like, I think about, there's value in the sampling period that my friend David Epstein spoke about in the New York Times bestselling book, Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. I love that book. Anyone listening to or watching this, please check out Range by David Epstein. But he talks about the importance of a sampling period. And I completely agree. As a mother of a 7-year-old child, that is my goal right now, is to just broadly expose Lily to as much as I can, to get the brain like kind of woken up to all these different activities, which I think will pay off in later life, but also just to help her figure out what does she really want to like dive into more deeply. But before she can make that decision, she needs to know what her options are, of course. And for a lot of the way that our society is designed is like, okay, well, when you get 18, go off to college maybe, or pick a career and just pick your field, pick it. And these are children. You're asking to pick something for decades. And gosh, I think we need to come up with a better model than that.
And I think a lot of people really don't realize too that college is not the only time you learn in life. You need to be learning lifelong. You need to be continuously pushing your education. But a lot of the times people focus on one job, I guess you could say, or one career field from that college experience. And then they think that it's going to be like that for the rest of their life. But you may pivot or change careers 10 years down the line. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't have to pick just one thing. And a lot of people they get locked in that box because we get forced into it. We have just one thing, just one thing. And for the rest of your life, that's so much pressure. And it's not actually even really real. Like, you're not going to stay to the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. Learning really isn't limited to like being in a classroom or being a young person. Like, learning really, especially in the modern world where things are so complex, if you're not a continual lifelong life-wide learner, you're really at a disadvantage, So I think it's really important to just keep curious. If you don't use it, you lose it too. Keep that in mind. Like, if you want to be mentally capable, keep exercising your brain, use it, keep learning.
Well, you sort of already explained this already, but I want to ask, I think it would be good for the audience to hear what makes you so passionate about polymath.
For me, it's a way to live your best life. It's a way to explore the full human experience, to upgrade and upskill yourself more and more over time, to evolve into better versions of yourself over time. It's a way to explore and have fun, like for a good, strong polymath, learning is actually quite pleasurable and fun, especially when it's something that you want to learn about. I'm passionate about polymathy because for me, that's the way to live a good life, to be free and authentic and brave and curious, and to let your superpower of learning really enhance your life experience.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think this particular episode is going to be really just a deep dive into polymathy, because it's one of those things where you and I both, like you said earlier, we have a channel around polymathy. This is what we talk about. This is what we do. This is what our meta niche is about. And so, unlike even some other episodes on this podcast that I do, this is going to be even more so of a deep dive into the idea.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What makes you so passionate about polymathy?
I think we talked a little bit about this the other day, but it was interesting to think about how whenever I was growing up, I was fascinated by Da Vinci.
Right.
I remember doing in seventh grade a presentation on him, making one of those trifold cardboard presentations. And when everyone else they did the bare minimum, having maybe this 8 things on the board. I had like 30 essentially. Like I filled my board to the brim because he did so much. There was so much to talk about, and it was one of those things where someone like that fascinated me. And even as I got older, something I didn't mention the other day when we talked is that when I was in high school, one of my best learning experiences was when I took an autodidactic approach and I went to the school library and just pillaged through the world religion section within a matter of months. Just read voraciously as much as possible. So I got a basically college level education when it came to philosophy and religion. And this kind of autodidactic, wide ranging, and just passionate about many different topics just imbued into my life, even from a young age. Even when I was under the age of 10, I was trying to be an entrepreneur. And so even wearing many hats and doing a lot of different things was even back when I was a kid too.
Oh, there's nothing cuter than a child entrepreneur.
Yeah. There's a little stand for Earth Day we have in town, like our little festival. I had a little stand during that festival selling temporary tattoos, like little 10-year-old, 2 little kid tables.
Oh, that is so adorable. I
Of
love
course,
it.
all the college kids were all over it. It was hilarious.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I think polymathy it sort of wakes you up to the enriching experiences that are available here on Earth when you view life as a playground of discovery, like a journey, an adventure. Life becomes your ability to. It's almost like artistic expression. Your life becomes an artistic expression of who do I want to become? How will I make myself into the person I want to be through learning?
Yeah, no, that's actually why I created PolyInnovator, because I had an idea of what I wanted to achieve in my life. I didn't know how to get there, so I wanted to make a foundation, and then every phase of, or I guess you could say specialty discipline, was going to be built upon that. And I was trying to plan out ahead of time. And I don't think people think generally that big macro picture, but I think we should more often.
Yeah, for sure. That's another strength of most polymaths is because they have more data inputs across disciplines. They're
Mm-hmm.
better at zooming out and sort of seeing the whole system and how the interconnections work, and it just allows for a better view of reality when there's more data points and lenses and perspectives that a single person can wear rather than the old narrative which was no, just put on one lens and see everything through that. And that's very limiting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's like putting on not blindfold, binoculars, and you're blocking out part of your vision that way.
Yeah, exactly. I think of it, it's like putting on blinders, like the binoculars. It's like being colorblind, it's choosing just to see like one color that you pick. And, I personally believe that a lot of the reason we're in all the trouble we are as a species on a global level with, global warming and rampant poverty and all the serious issues humanity is contending with today. I think part of what got us in this problem was specialization. I think it really blinded people and created incentive structures to just think about your swim lane
Mhm.
And don't worry how other people would be affected or how, how the bigger system is going to operate. People just focused on their industry and their swim lane, and it's done quite a lot of damage, I would say. We need to return to thinking more holistically and with systems thinking so that we can solve our problems. Specialization was good for a time when the world was simpler. It was efficient. It literally was de-skilling people, but we went along with it for some time. And I think now we're beginning to realize the damage that can do.
Mhm.
And we've got to return to holistic,
Return to form.
multidisciplinary, polymathic thinking for our species to really reach its potential and not fall off the cliff of
Yeah.
global warming and rampant poverty getting more and more widespread and like all the problems we have. We need to solve those problems through polymathic thinking.
I almost feel like specialization lost its need in the 80s. And then when it came to the 90s, at like the end of the 80s into the 90s, we were kind of in this limbo period. And then we saw with the dot-com boom and all these new technologies coming out and new merging fields like nanotechnology, biotechnology in the 2000s, we're starting to see, okay, we need to start mixing disciplines, but don't do more than two. You can only have two. Over the 2010s and now in the 2020s, we kind of alluded to this when I was on your show too, this idea of a digital renaissance. And we're seeing a lot of generalists come alive when it comes to all these new technologies and being able to adapt to this new world, new fields.
Yeah. The way I think of it was, the internet was a massive historic game changer for humanity. And the internet's old news at this point, right? Like most modern
60
people
years
have
old.
had access to the internet since the 1990s. I know I got the internet, America Online and email and chat and all that function in 1996, I believe it was. So I was 15 at the time. So the internet was like a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's been other things that happened, so the internet basically made it so you could theoretically you could connect with any person, and that all this data and information is stored on a humanity-wide network, the internet. You can Google something and you could find information. It's one big shared drive, basically, is the internet. But then now AI is here, and AI can help make sense of all that data in a much more efficient way than any single human can do. And AI can really help us. But now humans need to guide and work with AI, which is internet based, obviously. And so I really think that the people who are going to fare the best into the future, leveraging the real power and magic and capabilities and efficiencies of artificial intelligence, are people who are polymathic. Mm-hmm. Because if you are highly specialized, you're not going to know what questions to, like, AI may give you an answer and then you can only see it through your binoculars. That is also not effective. Plus, never mind the fact that in this kind of economy, you really need a safety net in your poly capabilities. So we need to stop being one-trick ponies. We need to stop putting ourselves in cages of specialization, and we need to have a renaissance of, the human experience being all that we can be and not so much fitting in and conforming and doing what we're told. We need to be able to think for ourselves. And God, in this age of information and misinformation, it's more important than ever to really have the ability to think for yourself. Otherwise, your mind, you could just have all these thought viruses just take over your brain. Yeah. I call them thought viruses because really thoughts spread like a virus. And some of them are quite harmful and maybe not even valid. Like, we really need to reclaim the sovereignty of our own mind space for ourselves. Everybody has the right to own their mind space and not be brainwashed, right? And polymathy is the antidote to being brainwashed, in my view.
Brings you to a different level of thinking. And one thing before I get to the next question here too, what's really interesting is the fact that AI doesn't have to be just on the internet. You can put it locally on your computer. And there's a lot of potential there that's not being talked about very much. And I'm hoping to maybe work in that as well, but that's a whole other topic. How has Polymath's place evolved over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I completed my doctorate in 2018, I just want to provide some context, right? So I came from academia. I got a doctoral degree. When I wrote my doctoral dissertation, by the way, I thought, I'll write this thing and there will be about 3 people in the world who will ever read it. And they're the people on my committee. And I wrote it. I thought it was pretty good. but I didn't expect anything to happen with it. Michael Araki, a fellow Polymathy studies scholar, said, hey, stick it on ResearchGate. It's been on ResearchGate since 2018 or 2019. It has something like over 5,000 people have read it from
Crazy.
ResearchGate, or at least looked at it. I don't know if they read the whole thing, obviously, but and I'm not answering your question quite directly, but that's one part of it. Like, how has Polymath Place evolved? Well, I decided not to stay in academia. I decided that I wanted the message of polymathy to be exposed to real people. So that's why I created the Facebook community and the YouTube channel. And there were years where there was hardly, I mean, it took a year or two until it really became like a bustling community in the Facebook group. Now we've got something like 13 members. And I hear from a lot of people like, this has changed my life. It's helped me gain such self-realization. Thank you so much. And people are meeting each other and collaborating with each other. And they're very engaged in the community. So that's been really heartwarming to see it really mature. Because now at this point, I think the group is like 5 or 6 years old. And then as for the YouTube channel, I never thought I would become a YouTuber, but it just seemed the most efficient way to like get content out to the masses who might not read a doctoral dissertation, right? And so, you know, a lot of the videos I started out making on the Polymath Place YouTube channel were me just literally reading my doctoral dissertation on a teleprompter. Like a lot of the just me talking. That's a doctoral dissertation I'm just reading. That's my script.
I was gonna say, like, that's what Robert Greene does with his like 48 Laws of Power, for example. He makes a lot of content around each law. He'll make content about different laws coming together. And I figured you could even kind of return to form on that as well with your going forward with the channel. I think that'd be a really good idea to kind of bring that back and also repurpose the clips for TikTok and Shorts and stuff like that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so savvy with all the social media platforms. I also have a Twitter account for Polymath Place, but I haven't done a whole lot over there. I want to get involved with Instagram and TikTok and some of the more modern forms of social media. That is one of my goals. I finally have some staff working for me now, so they'll be able to help me with that soon. Things are getting busy. Polymath Place is a limited liability company in the US. Like I can take, you know, consulting clients, coaching clients, speaking gigs, writing gigs, all of that. Like it's matured so much since I was last on your channel. And I really do feel like it's helping people. You know, one woman told me that my work saved her life. And and what I hear from, and I'm not saying that to like boost my own ego, but a lot of polymaths felt weird, like something's wrong with them because everyone else can specialize and do the things they're told. And I don't want to. Something must be wrong with me. I think I'm a freak. I think I'm crazy. And then finally, they, you know, when people find Polymath Place, they realize, oh, wait a minute. I'm not crazy. I'm not weird. It is good to be multi-talented and multi-capable and continue to learn broadly and over the whole lifespan. Like, there's nothing wrong with how I am. Actually, maybe there's something really great about how I am. And so Polymath Place has been, you know, a safe haven really for polymathic people to meet each other and just not feel like weirdos anymore, to feel understood and appreciated. So I think, you know, I consider Polymath Place kind of my baby. It's been a journey. I've been doing this work. It's now 2024. I started it, like I said, in 2018. I've done it all for free because I care about the mission and the topic. And I think it helps people unleash their authentic selves out into the world. And I think we need more of that.
I think so too. And I think this kind of leads into the next question pretty well as well. So in an ideal timeline, right, we get more and more people realizing the power and importance of polymaths. 20 years down the line, what do you envision the world looking like?
I look forward to a future when it's considered normal and healthy and good for people to be multifaceted and to not like have to tell a story of specialization, to not have to censor information about their full personhood just so other people can understand it more easily and put them in a box more easily. I look forward to a world where polymaths gather and help solve global level problems. That's already happening. Maybe I'll take this opportunity to mention. So in 2023, several co-founders, along with myself, including Barry James, who's my main partner in this effort, have founded a nonprofit charity. It's based out of England. and it's called the Modern Polymaths Institute. We're in startup mode. We're not quite public yet, but it does exist. We have a bank account, a strategy, a board of advisors. I think we've got a website sort of mostly ready. And I can't wait to see what happens when you bring polymaths together, because if you look back in history, what you see is a lot of the real jumps forward in humanity have been led by polymaths.
Steve Jobs, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, you could Leonardo da Vinci, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson,
Henry Ford.
George Washington. Like there's so many people.
Ada Lovelace.
Yeah, I mean, you could go on and on. Like, if you look at like who has really impacted humanity over history, it's the polymaths. It's the highly capable people who weren't afraid to learn broadly and then do something with what they learned and solve problems. And so there's great power in just one polymath. And the question is, well, what would happen if you brought a group of them together and empowered them with AI, which is here now?
Yeah.
How quickly and amazingly could we solve the problems of our world and co-create a heaven here on earth for everybody? So I look forward to a time when the Modern Polymaths Institute is fully formed and up and running, and polymaths have a safe haven to meet each other, to collaborate, to do research together, to get involved in think and do tank, to really solve problems using their superpower of learning. Yeah.
I think that kind of is an interesting point too when it comes to this idea of making innovation hubs, not only just for the world entirely, but even just in different countries too, and having kind of this network of hubs. Because as a polymath, you have something you probably learned first. It's kind of like your anchor specialty that you did. If you want to think of like a T-shaped person, that was your anchor. Eventually, we build out and get our other hubs of knowledge areas that we've mastered. And the same visualization could be applied towards this idea of like different innovation hubs around the world. You have your main one that's like, okay, whatever that ended up being, the main hub of innovation. Then you have hubs like MPI in London, you have a hub, maybe Silicon Valley, you have a hub in Africa, you have a hub in China, all these different places where we can come up with new ideas and share them with other hubs around the world.
Yeah. You know, I like to think of a polymath as a person, a single individual who, because of their intrapersonal diversity, can do systems thinking. They can zoom out and see holistically the whole problem. If they want to understand something, they're good at learning, understand what the root problem is, ask the whys, get to, do some proper strategic analysis, and then figure out, okay, well, how do we get from the current state to the ideal state, and then make it happen? This is what polymaths are good at. And so a polymath themselves is really in a good position to do systems thinking, which can really help solve problems, okay, instead of the blinder thinking. But when you bring a group of systems thinkers together to do systems thinking with AI, and maybe bring in narrow specialists, hyper specialists as needed to help inform the vision and the plan, I really do believe that we could come up with some amazing ideas, plans, innovations, ideas. God, the creativity that polymaths are capable of is really noteworthy. But imagine the possibilities when you've got a group of them coming together. It's like systems thinking on steroids.
I definitely agree. And it's one of those things where every individual polymath has that same prowess, but then when you put them together, it starts to multiply. As long as they can work together, of course. But yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait to see this come to fruition. I really feel like this is my life's. Well, I have many things I'm passionate about, right? I'm passionate about government being a force for good, for human thriving, and to reduce human suffering. I think government can do better. And I'm not even talking politics. I'm talking the bureaucratic machine that keeps grinding along no matter who's elected. I think it all can do a lot better, especially in the courts and the prisons. I'm passionate about that too. Oh, by the way. But polymathy for me is my life's work. I think I'll be talking about it and promoting it forever. And I look forward to a time when other people talk about it more too. And it's just like common knowledge that like, oh yeah, of course we want to unleash the full human capacities. Why would we limit ourselves? That doesn't make sense, especially in the face of complex problems that humanity has in the 21st century.
Well, you have so many things going on with all the different businesses and endeavors. What is next for you on your journey?
Well, standing up the Modern Polymath Institute. I mean, it's already stood up, but like really doing all the prep work to
Mhm.
make it public so people can start getting involved with it. That is what is my biggest focus right now. And part of what's beginning to happen as well is because I'm sort of like this lighthouse or beacon or mother hen or however you think of it. Like I'm Madame Polymathy, right? It's my passion, it's my thing, and I'm out in the world about it and on social media, put myself out there. Because of that, strong polymaths find me. And then I start learning about what they're working on. Like they're all like there are strong individual polymaths or polymaths working in small groups who are doing amazing things who already are beginning to loop me in. So like I'm working on projects that if implemented fully and expanded throughout the world would improve, if not fix, global warming and rampant poverty. Like I'm beginning to work on projects with living geniuses that could change our world, and they've already figured it out. So the MPI, standing up the Modern Polymath Institute, is part of what is next for me, but also just beginning to collaborate with the great living polymaths of our time
Mhm.
is also next on my journey. And it's so exciting. I mean, I just pinch myself that I'm in the room, at all with these sorts of conversations that are beginning to happen and the plans about it, and that I get to be part of it. And, one thing that is cool, one of the things I bring to those polymaths too, and I don't know if this is interesting or not, but I spent 15 years working in government, as I mentioned, and I was a White House intern. I started my career working at the executive office of the president. Like I've got pictures of me with Bush and Obama and Biden. And I've met some really cool people in my days at the White House. I've met some really cool people in my days as a doctoral student. I've met some really cool people in my work as a polymathy scholar. And so one of the things I'm really excited to be able to do is when these genius level people approach me with their solutions to things like global warming and rampant poverty, I go, well, how can I help? And part of how I can help is by leveraging the really cool network that I've established over decades while I did some cool stuff. And, along the way, when I was meeting all these cool people, I never really thought, oh, they're going to come in handy for me later. I just like people. I like maintaining contact. I like friendships. I think I'm pretty down to earth. At least I try to be. What's next for me on my journey is like using all the work I've been doing for decades. I joke like I became an overachiever when I was 12. I'm now 42. So I've already had like a 30-year career of being an overachiever. um, and so, yeah, what's next for me is really just trying to empower the greatest living polymaths of our time to unleash their potential individually and collectively so that our world can become a better place for everybody. And I'm really, really interested not just in smart, capable geniuses who have a good brain.
Mhm.
I'm really, really interested in partnering and supporting with polymathic living geniuses who have a good heart and who have a mission. And it's not just about their profit and their benefit, but how they can use their talent to uplift others. So that's really what I'm excited about. And what's next on my journey is just dedicating my life. Like I don't have a 9 to 5. I left government about 2 years ago. Um, I've figured out a way through real estate to have enough money to kind of get by financially. And I just really want to dedicate my life to how I can promote human thriving and reduce human suffering. And that's why I do it through the lens of polymathy. And right now, I also do it through the lens of criminal justice reforms, because I feel like some of the worst suffering on the earth is in prisons, especially American prisons. America is 5% of the world's population, but a quarter of the world's incarcerated people are in the United States. It's a real humanitarian crisis as far as I'm concerned. And so I'm excited to be a voice in the reforms on that front too. So I'm just
Yeah.
really dedicated to using however many years I have left to live, to see how we can make this little rock floating on in space better for everyone who's here.
I definitely like how we're aligned in a lot of ways too. I remember the last time I had you on years ago, I was even talking to you about this idea of like bringing together all these different tribes of polymaths, because there's one on Discord, there's someone Reddit, there's obviously Polymath's Place, and even the PolyInnovator construct. and all these different places, and like bringing them together is going to be really exciting and seeing that change. What would be a call to growth for the audience to do to improve?
Get involved. Join a group. Like, think about it. Make some posts about it. Share awareness about it. Like, spread awareness for polymathy. And I know it's uncomfortable for some people because they've never heard the word, or they don't want to claim that I am a polymath. That's why I encourage people, okay, make it an adjective. Just, can you be polymathic? Is that more comfortable? Obviously, it exists on a spectrum. So my call to action would be, get involved, like embrace your own polymathy, learn broadly, learn deeply, be committed to excellence, be curious, get to know people unlike yourself. I can tell you, I have worked at the executive office of the president and met some very fancy, cool people, some of whom are my friends. And I've also became friends with prisoners. I've seen the full spectrum of like people doing really good and people really suffering. And they're all human. Okay. And they're all worth getting to know. I really feel like it's enriched my life, just being open to learning from people very unlike myself and see what I find. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned some of the other content creators in the polymathy space. And I like to do, and I'm so glad for our collaborations as well, because we're, some of the more prolific content creators on the internet and have been for many years. This is beginning to attract more and more content creators who maybe see it as a new niche where they can, make some money or make some impact, the impact is great. I like to support, because for me, this is about polymathy. This is about human potential. This is about self-actualization. This is about solving global level problems through systems thinking and holistic thinking and good hearts. So whoever wants to join the field, please do. The academic field of polymathy studies really did not exist in all that much. There wasn't much in the academic literature. Robert Root Bernstein and a few other scholars had written about polymathy. But now it's like an actual field. I wrote my doctoral, mine was the first in the field, which is sad that it took until 2018 for someone to come along and want to write or do research on the human phenomenon of polymathy. Then Florian Stummer wrote the second one, and I supervised his work. Dimitrios Samsonidis, of course, Michael Araki. Like, there's more and more activity. I met someone who's writing a master's thesis, Christelle from Belgium, just reached out recently. And so there's more and more, like, this is really a thing. It's a legitimate thing now that polymathy studies is an academic discipline. And there's also, like I said, various content creators in pop culture outside of academia who are helping to bring awareness to polymathy studies. So I hope that as a field, we can collaborate and support each other, since this really should be about the mission and the ideas more than any one person. Humanity needs this revolution to take place, the polymathic revolution. So for me, it's really more about how that can happen more than any one person's name or, shtick.
Well, you and I both have this idea of just being open to, it's one of those things we want to try to encourage as many people as possible. We're not trying to limit it behind a paywall or something like that. That's not our goal. Our goal is to, share this idea, share our passions, and invite people onto our shows to talk to and highlight their lives. Obviously, I told you before this too, but the point of this podcast is not to make money. It's to highlight these different polymathic individuals, even if they don't see themselves as polymathic, to help see that potential in their life. And what's really fascinating too is, like, there's been people I've had on the show who, when I reached out to them, I didn't quite realize who they were when it came to, like, maybe their level of attainment, or perhaps like their level of impact on other people's lives too, like different capital investors, or even in academia and stuff like that. All I cared about was who they were as a person, and I had them on the show, and they came on because they saw that I was genuinely interested in who they are and their different multidisciplinary skills. So I thank you for coming back on. Once again, this is Dustin, PolyInnovator, and Madame Polymath, Dr. Angela Cotellessa, on the Round 2 Polycast. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to discuss polymathy with you, and thanks for everyone for listening to this. I just encourage you all to, spread awareness and explore your own polymathy. And if you want, join the community, keep following us, get some new content, and learn how to really leverage and step into the power of your own polymathy. Because I really think there's power in labeling it, because it gives you permission to really step into it more and more, to become your best self. So do that.
Cheers.
Bye.